I still remember the day I saw him, a single father working tirelessly to make ends meet. He was sitting alone in the cafeteria, staring at a piece of paper with a mix of worry and desperation on his face. I didn't know his story, but something about the look in his eyes struck a chord in me. I felt an overwhelming urge to help him, to make a difference in his life. As I watched him from afar, I learned that he was working multiple jobs just to put food on the table for his kids. He would often go without meals so that they could eat, and his exhaustion was palpable. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know what. That's when I came up with a plan. I would pose as a janitor at his workplace, get close to him, and find ways to help him without him even realizing it. I know it sounds crazy, maybe even a little deceptive, but I felt like it was the only way to really make a difference. I couldn't just hand him a check or offer a one-time favor. I wanted to be able to support him consistently, to be a steady presence in his life. So I applied for the janitor job at his office building, and to my surprise, I got it. My first day on the job was nerve-wracking. I had to make sure that no one suspected my true intentions, that I was just another employee trying to make a living. I put on my uniform, grabbed my cleaning cart, and set out to learn the ropes. As I worked, I caught glimpses of the single father, watching him as he interacted with his coworkers, as he took calls from his kids, and as he ate his lunch alone in the break room. I was determined to keep my distance, to observe and learn without being noticed. But as the days turned into weeks, I found myself looking forward to seeing him, to watching him smile when he thought no one was looking. And I knew that I had made the right decision, that posing as a janitor was the key to helping him, even if it meant keeping my true identity hidden. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of an incredible journey, one that would change both of our lives forever. As I got to know him better, I began to understand the depth of his struggles, and my desire to help him only grew stronger. I'll never forget the day I met the single father's kids. I had been working as a janitor for a few weeks, and I had gotten into a routine. I would see the father, whose name was John, rushing to get his kids ready for school in the morning, and then I would see him coming home late at night, exhausted. I had started to learn more about his daily routine and the challenges he faced as a single parent. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the hallways, I saw two kids, a boy and a girl, walking towards me. They looked curious, and they eyed me with a mix of suspicion and interest. The boy, who looked like he was around 10 years old, had a messy mop of brown hair, and the girl, who was a few years younger, had big brown eyes and a cute smile. They introduced themselves as Max and Emma, and I learned that they were John's kids. As I talked to them, I realized that they were struggling to cope with their father's busy schedule. They would often have to fend for themselves, making their own dinners and doing their homework without much supervision. I saw the impact that their father's struggles were having on their lives, and it broke my heart. They were such sweet kids, and they deserved so much more. Over the next few days, I made a point to spend more time with Max and Emma. I would play with them during my breaks, and I would help them with their homework. I started to form a bond with them, and they would look forward to seeing me every day. I was amazed by their resilience and their positive attitude, despite the challenges they faced. As I got to know the family better, my mission to help John became more personal. I realized that I wasn't just helping a struggling single father. I was helping a family that was in desperate need of support. I started to think about ways to help them beyond just my janitorial duties. I wanted to make a real difference in their lives, and I was determined to find a way to do it. As I reflected on my experiences with the family, I realized that my help might not be enough to solve all their problems. John's struggles were deeply ingrained, and they would require more than just a few kindnesses to overcome. I started to feel a sense of unease, wondering if I had bitten off more than I could chew. But I was determined to see it through, no matter what. I was in this now, and I was going to do everything I could to make a difference in their lives. I'll never forget the look on John's face when I first started making small changes in his life. As I posed as a janitor, I had the perfect opportunity to observe him and his family, and I knew exactly where to start. At first, it was just helping out with small tasks and errands, picking up groceries for him, dropping off his kids at school, or even just being a listening ear when he needed someone to talk to. As time went on, I started to leave anonymous gifts and notes of encouragement for the family. I'd leave a batch of freshly baked cookies on their doorstep, or a heartfelt letter of support in their mailbox. I wanted to remind them that they weren't alone, that someone out there cared about their well-being. And as I did, I started to notice the positive changes in their lives. The kids seemed happier, more carefree, and John's expression wasn't as weighed down by worry and stress. But what really caught my attention was John's reaction to these small acts of kindness. At first, he was confused who was behind these mysterious gifts and notes. He'd look around, trying to figure out who could be doing such things, but I always made sure to stay one step ahead, keeping my identity hidden. As the days turned into weeks, however, I noticed his confusion start to give way to gratitude. He'd smile to himself, a sense of wonder on his face, and I could tell that he was starting to feel seen, to feel like someone was looking out for him. It was a small spark, but it was enough to give me hope. Maybe, just maybe, my actions could make a real difference in John's life. Maybe I could help him see that he wasn't alone, that there were people out there who cared about him and his family. And as I continued to pose as a janitor, making small changes and leaving anonymous gifts, I couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement and anticipation. What would happen next? How would John react when he finally discovered the truth behind the mysterious acts of kindness? I could only wait and see. But for now, I was content to keep being a small part of their lives, to keep making a difference in any way that I could. I'd been posing as a janitor for what felt like an eternity, watching the single father struggle to make ends meet. But after weeks of small acts of kindness, I started to notice a change in him. He'd smile more often, and his eyes didn't seem as sunken as they used to be. The weight of the world wasn't crushing him as much, and I could sense a glimmer of hope in his demeanor. As I went about my daily routine, emptying trash cans and sweeping floors, I'd catch glimpses of the family's life. The kids were laughing more, playing with each other in the evenings, and their father was actually joining in. He'd read them bedtime stories, tuck them in, and kiss them goodnight. It was a beautiful thing to see, and I felt a sense of pride knowing that my actions were contributing to this positive change. The single father's financial situation was still precarious, but it was improving slightly. He'd found a few extra shifts at work, and the kid's mother had started sending some child support payments. It wasn't much, but it was enough to take some of the pressure off. I'd see him paying bills on time, and the look of relief on his face was palpable. One day, as I was cleaning the kitchen, the youngest kid came up to me and gave me a big hug. "Thank you, Mr. Janitor," she said, looking up at me with big brown eyes. "Daddy's happy again." I smiled, feeling a lump form in my throat, and hugged her back. It was moments like these that made everything worth it. As I continued to help the family, I started to notice the impact of my actions. The single father was standing taller, his shoulders back, and his head held high. The kids were thriving, and the atmosphere in the house was lighter, happier. I realized that I couldn't stop now, not when things were finally starting to look up. I decided to continue helping, to see this family through to the end of their struggles. But just as things were starting to fall into place, I sensed a new challenge on the horizon. The single father's face would cloud over when he thought no one was looking, and I'd catch him staring at a stack of bills or a letter from the bank. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it couldn't be good. And as I looked around at the happy family, I wondered what was waiting for them just around the corner, threatening to undo all the progress we'd made. I'll never forget the day I received a call from the kids, frantic with worry. Their dad had been taken to the hospital, and they didn't know what was wrong with him. I immediately dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, my heart racing with fear. As I arrived, I saw the kids pacing back and forth in the waiting room, their eyes filled with tears. I tried to reassure them that everything would be okay, but deep down I was scared too. As we waited for news, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. The single father, who had once been on the verge of losing everything, had finally started to get his life back on track. He had a steady job, a roof over his head, and his kids were thriving. But now it all seemed to be at risk again. The thought of him not being able to work, of not being able to provide for his family, was devastating. Finally, the doctor came out to talk to us. The single father had suffered a minor heart attack, and he needed to undergo surgery. The kids were beside themselves, worried that they might lose their dad. I tried to stay strong for them, but it was getting harder by the minute. As I looked at them, I knew I had to make a decision. Should I reveal my true identity to the hospital staff to see if I could pull some strings and get him the best care possible? Or should I keep my secret hidden and risk not being able to help him as much as I could? As I stood there weighing my options, I saw the fear and uncertainty in the kids' eyes. They were counting on me, and I knew I had to do something. But what? I thought about all the times I'd seen the single father struggle, all the times I'd wanted to help him but couldn't. Now it seemed like fate was giving me a second chance. But at what cost? I knew that if I revealed my true identity, it could change everything. The single father might feel betrayed, the kids might feel confused, and I might lose the one thing that had driven me to help them in the first place, my anonymity. As I stood there, torn and unsure, I knew that whatever decision I made would have consequences. The single father's life and our relationship hung in the balance, and I had to make a choice, no matter how difficult it seemed. The question was, what would I do? Would I risk everything to help the person I had grown to care about, or would I stay hidden in the shadows and hope that everything worked out okay? Only time would tell. I took a deep breath as I approached him, my heart racing with anticipation. We were in the empty hallway of the building where I had been posing as a janitor for weeks, the smell of disinfectant and freshly polished floors filling the air. The fluorescent lights above hummed softly, casting a sterile glow over the scene. I had been dreading this moment, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't keep up the charade any longer. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" I asked, trying to sound casual despite the knot in my stomach. He looked up from the papers he was sorting, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Sure, what's up?" he replied, his voice friendly as always. I fidgeted with my hands, unsure of how to start. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something important." He set the papers down and gave me his full attention, his expression serious. "What is it?" he asked, his tone gentle. I took another deep breath before launching into my confession. "I'm not who you think I am," I said, the words tumbling out of my mouth. "I'm not a janitor. I've been posing as one to help you." I paused, studying his reaction. At first, he looked like he had been punched in the gut. His eyes widened in shock, and he took a step back, as if trying to process what I had just said. I couldn't blame him. I had been lying to him for weeks, deceiving him into thinking I was someone I'm not. But as the initial shock began to wear off, I saw a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. He looked at me with a mix of curiosity and confusion, like he was trying to piece together the puzzle. "Why?" he asked, his voice laced with emotion. "Why would you do that?" I explained everything. How I had seen him struggling, how I had wanted to help, how I had come up with the plan to pose as a janitor. As I spoke, I could see the tension in his body begin to ease, replaced by a sense of wonder and gratitude. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine, as I poured out my heart to him. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a long time. He just stood there, looking at me with a mixture of shock, gratitude, and curiosity. I could see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to process everything I had told him. And then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. It was a small smile, but it was enough to give me hope. Maybe, just maybe, he would be able to forgive me for my deception. Maybe he would even understand why I had done it. The silence between us was palpable, filled with unspoken emotions and unresolved questions. But as we stood there, looking at each other, I knew that everything had changed. The revelation had broken the ice, and now we could start to build something new, something real. The single father's reaction had been unexpected, but it had also been a turning point. And as we stood there, frozen in time, I knew that our lives would never be the same again. As I stood before him, my eyes locked on his, I could see the mixture of emotions swirling inside. He was trying to process the revelation, his mind racing with questions and feelings. I had expected anger, maybe even resentment, but what I saw was something entirely different. His eyes, red-rimmed from lack of sleep and the weight of his struggles, welled up with tears. He looked like a man who had been carrying the burden of the world on his shoulders, and for a moment, that weight seemed to crush him. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Why would you do this for me? For us?" He gestured towards his children, who were watching the scene unfold with wide, curious eyes. They had grown accustomed to my presence, but they had no idea who I really was or why I was there. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I saw how hard you were working, how much you were sacrificing for your children. I wanted to help to make a difference in some small way." I paused, reflecting on my own motivations. "I guess I just wanted to be a part of something bigger than myself, to feel like I was making a real impact on someone's life." The single father nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "You have no idea how much you've done for us, your help, your kindness. It's been a lifeline." He choked back a sob, his body shaking with emotion. "But why did you feel like you had to hide it? Why did you pose as a janitor?" I hesitated, unsure of how to explain. "I didn't want to be seen as some kind of hero or charity case. I just wanted to be able to help without expecting anything in return." I looked away, feeling a pang of guilt. I know it was wrong to deceive you, but I hoped that by the time you found out, you would see that my intentions were pure." The single father's children, who had been quietly observing the conversation, suddenly spoke up. "Thank you," they said in unison, their small voices filled with sincerity. They looked at me with newfound understanding and gratitude, and in that moment I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The single father smiled weakly, his eyes still shining with tears. "Yes, thank you, not just for the help, but for showing us that there are still good people in this world." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "I'm sorry if I made you feel like you had to hide. You're more than welcome to be a part of our lives, as a friend, as a whatever you want to be." As we talked, the tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of understanding and forgiveness. It was a moment of raw emotion, of truth and vulnerability, and it changed everything. The aftermath of the revelation set the stage for a new beginning, one where relationships could be built on honesty and trust, and where the true value of kindness and compassion could be realized. As I look back on the journey I've been on with this single father and his kids, I'm still trying to process the emotions that overwhelm me. From the moment I posed as a janitor to help them out, I knew I was taking a risk, but I had no idea it would lead to such a profound connection. The single father, once a stranger, had become like a brother to me, and his kids, like my own nieces and nephews. After the revelation, when they found out I wasn't who they thought I was nervous about how they would react. Would they feel betrayed, or would they understand my intentions? But as we sat down to talk, I saw the tension melt away, replaced by a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation. They didn't care that I had posed as a janitor. What mattered to them was that I had shown up, that I had cared. As we embarked on this new journey together, I realized that our bond was built on trust and mutual respect. We had been through so much, and yet we had come out stronger on the other side. The single father's life, once marked by struggle and hardship, was now filled with hope and possibility. His kids, once hesitant to trust others, now had a newfound sense of security and belonging. I remember the first time we all sat down for dinner together, laughing and sharing stories like we had known each other for years. The single father's kids would climb all over me, playing and teasing me like I was a part of the family. And in that moment, I knew that I had made a difference, that my kindness had sparked a chain reaction of hope and renewal. As I look to the future, I know that our lives will never be the same. We've been forever changed by this experience, and will carry the lessons we've learned with us for the rest of our lives. The single father and his kids will always be a part of me, a reminder of the power of human connection and the impact we can have on each other's lives. And so, as we close this chapter and begin a new one, I'm filled with a sense of hope and excitement. I know that there will be challenges ahead, but I also know that we'll face them together as a family. The end of this story marks the beginning of a new chapter, one that's full of promise and possibility. And as I look to the future, I know that I'll always be grateful for this journey, for the lessons I've learned, and for the people who have become like a second family to me.